I'm very glad to be here and to focus our attention also, as Marco said, on a non-technical topic, because as already identified by International Atomic Energy Agency and other key stakeholders in the nuclear industry, there are a lot of factors of different nature that affect nuclear safety, and we need to have a more holistic understanding so that we can be better professionals in that field to contribute to safety. But before I start, just a few words about myself. I'm a psychologist by background. I'm originally from Bulgaria, but I live in Finland. Work at VTT already 12 years, almost 12 years, and I have been mainly working in the nuclear industry. This time we are supporting the regulator, for example, for conducting independent safety culture assessments and other organizational factors type of research and development activities. I'm really glad to talk about this topic today, and let's go forward because we have limited time. So first, short background, then I'm going to define the stakeholders and institutions as concepts so that we're on the same page. Then the concept of institutional strength in depth, I'm going to talk about it. And then briefly, ELSMOR pre-study on stakeholder needs in Finland that we did in BP6 together with Fortum. And we are continuing with this research, so it would be very interesting to get also any kind of reactions from you and to discuss this topic further. And we will conclude with some key takeaways, and I'll give you instructions for the group work after the coffee break. So when you start from the coffee break, come from the coffee break, you can start right away with the discussions. All right, so what do we mean by a stakeholder? Broadly defined, stakeholder is any group or individual who feels affected by an activity, whether physically or emotionally. So as you can notice, we talk about emotions here. And yesterday, Sean talked about human factors, and also Ville mentioned human factors. So emotions are a very important part of us humans. And sometimes when we are working in a very technical field, there is kind of a tendency to think that the things can be very rationally decided or analyzed, and then we can proceed. But there are a lot of other factors that affect decision making and us, how we act in working life. So this is also relevant for being a stakeholder. So we are all stakeholders actually, because we are also citizens, no matter that we are also working, for example, for this industry or interested in stepping into this industry. In project management, for example, prospective stakeholders are entities who have an interest in successful implementation of a project. So they are affected by the project, but they also are very interested in proceeding towards success in the project. And they can have either positive or negative influence on the project. And the stakeholders, of course, vary in the degree of interest and influence they exert on the activities. And when we think about SMRs, stakeholders, we have to think also about how stakeholders are actually able to influence safety outcomes. Then this is some examples of stakeholders in the nuclear industry. As you can see, quite colorful group. We can have the legislation aspect, media, government agencies, decision makers, then the owner, operator, regulator, all different sort of suppliers and supply chains, the employees, of course, then communities near the actual or potential sites. This is like the local stakeholders. Neighboring countries could also be, of course, affected. We have to remember that nuclear industry has this kind of a transnational nature. Whenever something happens in any country, it affects globally everybody. Then the non-governmental organizations also play important role here. The public, and you could think also about other type of institutions or stakeholders, like educational institutions, for example, what kind of role they play. So what are the institutions? In institutional theory, institutions are defined as these humanly devised constraints that structure political, economic, and social interactions in society. And they are created in order to create order and reduce uncertainty. This is like a general, like high-level type of definition. You could think about institutions as stable social structures. They are established. There is a lot of energy and resources in order to establish them, to make them working. Of course, there is intention to always improve them, but they are there to stay, and they are not very easy to change. If you think about how we establish a university, for example, it can function for decades, and changes in such institutional arrangements take time. And these constraints can be either formal or informal. We could have formal rules, laws, regulations, other kind of enforcement mechanisms, but there are also informal ones. For example, norms of behavior, unwritten codes of conduct. There are, of course, also written ones, but they could be unwritten ones. Different types of incentives also, and sanctions. So these are also, it's important to understand that the institutions functions not only by written laws and documents. There are also a lot of unwritten norms and rules that actually can guide and steer the development of institutions. And when we think about institutional factors, we have to understand that institutions are associated with seeking legitimacy in society, because they are created in order to continue and succeed. And legitimacy could be understood as this degree of cultural support by which companies and also other organizations can gain and enhance support and recognition from other powerful institutional stakeholders. So that's why, for example, reputation is so important for companies, business continuity, and of course, when we think about nuclear industry, that's why also safety is so important. It's like the foundation for existing, and it's a foundation for the good business in nuclear, and it's a kind of a moving target, as we know. So this is one link between institutions, legitimacy in society for nuclear industry stakeholders, and then the concept of nuclear safety. When we have this kind of taken for granted beliefs and practices, they gradually became rooted. And we also talk about something being institutionalized. It also means that it is hard to change. And it takes time. It's not impossible. It takes time and resources. And this can spread in organizations, but also in whole industrial domains. And although operational conditions may be changing, there are new innovations, so new ways of working coming, these deeply rooted assumptions are not that quick to change. So they are lagging behind often as a phenomenon. And this may be also involving certain risks that need to be understood. So it's not linear that we say that, okay, we are changing now this institution, we are arranging management of this change, and everything is proceeding as planned. So there could be underlying phenomena and issues that actually affect the change process that we need to understand better. And the concept of institutional strength in depth was born after Fukushima. So International Atomic Energy Agency published the INSAC 27 document ensuring robust national nuclear safety systems, institutional strength in depth. And One reason, of course, was the thorough analysis of what happened in Fukushima. There were a lot of issues that I'm not going to, of course, now elaborate. There are a lot of reports, and I guess you are also familiar with many of those documents. But some important aspects of what happened with Fukushima was that, of course, there was the technical excellence was in place. And then when the plant, the Aichi plant, was faced with a natural disaster, they had to handle the situation. But after that, the analysis showed that there were a lot of issues, for example, related to lack of independent oversight. The regulator was not independent, acting independently as expected. There was a lot of autonomy given to TEPCO, for example, and a lot of issues. For example, another aspect was related to how TEPCO was dealing with the public trust issues. For example, when they had to communicate with the public regarding how they are going to deal with natural disasters, there were some insufficient or limited risk communication, with even inadequate, because the focus was on how not to break the trust in the public, in the operations of the company, and how not to end up needing and investing in new solutions if there is not enough trust in the operations. So there were a lot of issues that were not technical, and this was also part of the impetus for developing this kind of another type of defense layers that we need to think about when we build up a nuclear industry system. So it is based on the defense in depth that Vilda was talking about as a philosophy, and there are, in the same way, multiple layers and components. Independence of layers is required, and layers are built to include diversity, redundancy, and separation of function. But we are dealing with non-technical phenomena. Sean was using the expression "not exact science" yesterday, so we are dealing with social science issues here. They may not be easily measurable, but we need to understand what's going on in the system by using also this language and understanding better these phenomena. So it was recognized after the accident that a robust nuclear safety system has to be developed along with resilience capabilities. And here is very interesting balance that is imposed by this concept of institutional strength, in that it needs to be, the system has to be both robust and resilient. And now I would like to ask you, how do you understand this? How do we design a system that is robust and resilient at the same time? What is needed? If you think from safety engineering perspective, what is the difference between robustness and resilience?
Alireza,
yes.
Please.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. When we say robust, maybe we mean that we have a system that is strong enough against hard situations, for example, accidents. But when we say resilience, it means that it must be capable and it must cope itself with different situations.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for that. It's in that line of thinking. So robustness is when we are not trying to understand it in technical terms. Robustness is also about the ability to assess the system by different analysis. Like you can do certain types of audits, inspections, probabilistic safety analysis, whatever, safety types of analysis, in order to predict better what is going to happen. You evaluate the system, you evaluate what could go wrong. So there are tools and methods to analyze this. How to ensure that the system is robust and its function as it designed. But the resilience is needed also for those things that are beyond design, for anything that is what we say like dealing with the unexpected. There are always residual, emergent type of risks and hazards that could be like of hybrid nature. Things could influence each other that in a way that was not immediately understood. So resilience is also about, of course, the ability to adapt and to bounce back and to improve when there is some change that's coming to the system. So this kind of being strong and robust and resilient, flexible, adaptive at the same time is also something that we aim to build in institutions that are responsible for taking care of the functioning of the nuclear industry at national level, but also when we think about SMRs. And yesterday we heard a lot of talk about partnerships at European level and also international level. So this institutional strength in depth actually is something that is now, there is a lot of talk how to build this at global level, how to ensure that all the governments are built in that way and all the other stakeholders. There is a lot of already industrial cooperation, but there is not that much cooperation if you think about the other aspects. And this concept also, institutional strength in depth, calls for holistic understanding of safety. So importance of institutional systems and governance and how they complement technology and technical strengths, human organizational factors, and also strong safety culture is something that is very important in the nuclear industry. How many of you have knowledge or can say in your own words what is safety culture? Have you heard this before? Yes? Can you try to say?
Well, I think it's related to the human factor that both the personnel are trying to improve the safety. So it's always like pointing out issues instead of being silent.
Mm. The vigilance and questioning attitude. Yeah. It's part of that. Yes. Yes.
The whole safety culture might be a set of mindsets or like attitudes which would include, let's say, behavioral activities, like how we think about safety is implemented, as long as with the technical aspect that the safety systems are there, and the communication aspect that with personnel and public and all those stuff. So a combination of all of these, like an attitude, behavior that cannot be seen, and the safety system that can be seen, and a combination of all of these.
Yeah. All right. So this is safety culture is a holistic concept. It involves a lot of issues. And what I want you to remember is that, of course, IAEA has their own definition about safety culture. It emerged from after Chernobyl accident, but it's important to understand that safety culture is not only about attitudes or values or mindset. It's one important pillar, but we also need to include the understanding of safety culture as how we understand risks, how we understand specific hazards in the context that we are working with, and also how we understand the concept of safety itself, also the systemic nature of safety, so that we don't have a limited thinking about safety as a phenomena also. But what is this kind of, you said what cannot be seen, what is this emergent nature of safety? If you think about systems thinking, and safety as an emerging phenomena that is coming from the interactions of human in technical and organizational factors, but also contextual factors. And then a third pillar, so first is the mindset, and then you think about understanding of safety and risks. And then the third pillar, safety culture, is also the organizational infrastructure, if you think, like how the organization is functioned so that it's possible to work in the best, with the best quality. So that there is integrated management system in place, there is a good communication, there is information flow, there is decision making, clarity of roles and responsibilities. So all these things that make it possible to work with highest quality. And it's not enough only to have the right attitude. You need to have the tools to do your job safely. You need to be able to speak with your supervisor. You need to be able to report issues. You need to know that the managers will pay attention to it. You need to meet your managers at leadership walk-arounds and all these kind of things. So safety culture is a holistic concept, and this is something that is not very easy to understand always. But another important thing is, before we continue further, is that safety culture is also a normative concept. So we have a criteria for a good safety culture that needs to be fulfilled. And the descriptive concept is the organizational culture. So we can describe a culture with different words. You can write a story how a culture looks like, but it doesn't say whether this culture is good for safety or not. We need criteria, and these criteria are also listed in the International Atomic Energy Agency and other international bodies that describe the features of a good safety culture with all the dimensions that needs to be fulfilled. And there are quite a lot. So we talked already about this, that the concept is based on defense in depth philosophy. The three main independent institutional subsystems to prevent nuclear accidents are the industrial subsystem, regulator, and the stakeholders. And what is important to understand in this figure is that the licensee has the prime responsibility for safety of the facility. I think we all know that. But then what is, I made the figure in a way that they are separate entities to show the importance of independency of these three subsystems. But there are always interactions between them. And it's important to understand that if there is a weakness in the interactions between these subsystems, or if there is a weakness in any one of those, then the whole system is vulnerable. And in the Fukushima Daiichi accident, for example, the reports show that there were weaknesses in all of these and also in the interactions between them. So that it contributed tremendously to the accident development. And how it works is that the stakeholders, their role is to challenge the regulator and the industry, and the regulator and the industry, they are accountable to the stakeholders. And I will show you later the original figure. It's not here from the INSAC 27. So these three layers, the industrial, the regulator, and the stakeholders, when we zoom in and see them from a closer, so there are different layers of protection, and I will show you just briefly here all of these, and just to have an idea that how this is built conceptually. And then it's another question like, how do you do this in practice? So first is the organization's internal barriers, all the defense in depth issues and how the organization is functioning, the level of safety culture, organizational learning, and everything like that. So this is like what happens in the organization. But then we have the second layer is the peer pressure, what happens at national level, different states, and different other forums that are affecting how the organization's internal barriers are acting, their effectiveness. Then the third layer is international peer pressure, and then we have the review, international peer review as another layer to ensure strong nuclear safety at the industry level. Then when we think about the regulator, here we also have different layers. First is, of course, what happens in the authority as an organization. But then there we have another layer, which is special outside technical advice, which could come from technical support organization or some kind of testing facility or whatever, like a unit or entity that provides technical external advice to the regulator. Then there is again, international peer pressure and international peer reviews. So these are some of the layers that are listed in INSAC 27, or these are the layers that ensure that the regulatory subsystem stays strong. So when you think about the regulator, think about what's also around the regulator as an institutional layer, so that the regulator is not alone in what they are doing, but they have a lot of, yesterday Sean talked about different forums and regulators, all sorts of activities globally. And this is this kind of peer support, exchange of experience, how to do the things better, but also it also acts as a peer pressure to positively improve always the activities of the regulator.
Sorry, Nadia, there is a question from Teresa. What does it mean, peer pressure? Give some example of...
Yeah, well, it is actually, I think it's positively framed here, so it's pressure, it's not like a negative here thing. So one example could be some activity, for example, that is happening in some regulator, which, for example, supports cross-industrial learning in the regulator. So one example is, for example, the studies that were done after the Boeing 737 MAX accidents in Canada, in Canadian regulator, and then similar study was initiated in Finland also. Idea was to learn from aviation and the Boeing accidents what the nuclear industry can learn from that. And this is another layer of what is, how we can improve the activities in the nuclear industry by cross-industry learning. So this could be peer pressure. You hear about interesting research or positive experience somewhere, and then you can transfer it. It's a kind of a pressure. Probably there are negative examples also, but I would like to keep with that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Then stakeholder subsystem, it's this onion type is bigger here because we have different types of stakeholders here. It's like we need to granulate this subsystem more. And we have the public here at the core, and the national government or parliament, which is actually responsible for setting up the nuclear industry system nationally. Local government, neighbors, these are the local committees, and international community also is also related to that. Media, NGOs, or some special interest groups, and then again we have international peer reviews, which could be related to certain studies or audits or inspections or any activity that tries to understand better the stakeholder engagement. Then when we talk about strength here, I would like to just list and show you how it is understood in INSAC document. And I put the bamboo forest here because it's an interesting metaphor also if you think about that strong in this context, what it means. To encourage and welcome challenges, to challenge, well, I would say yourself and also others, to question and consider others' options and advices, to learn and listen, to respect opposing views, and to possess the competence and capacity to fulfill functions and duties. So it may sound a bit fuzzy, like how we understand the concept of strength, but it gives you strength when you have these qualities also as an organization, and it also improves the relationships with other organizations, and it also helps to build trust, which is a key component also in this context.
If I have to apply this list to the recent discussion about taxonomy, it's very difficult to find all those positive features in the discussion, in the media, even in the interviews and the comments from the member of parliament, probably.
Right, yeah. It can be very heated discussion because these are very, nuclear industry is could be very controversial, could bring up very controversial views. And of course, whatever, how much heated it is, no matter, you have to still be able to listen and all these kind of qualities.
Also respect others, even if they have different views, to possess the competence and capacity is something that is not automatic.
Mm-hmm. Right, then very briefly I will show you this pre-study that we did in Finland. The idea was to collect insights about needs and expectations of selected key stakeholders regarding SMRs. And it was done as a part of VP6 together with Fortum. Our motivation was that, okay, we know that the institutional strength in that concept has this kind of national focus. And we were thinking, okay, let's start with Finland and study these needs. And then now the idea is to collect data from Estonia or let's see some other countries so that we can do some comparative analysis at this point. What kind of needs are emerging from the key stakeholders? And these stakeholders are often also decision makers. So we need to understand better their needs and expectations. This was the summary report. It's also published on the website. You can have more from there. We just did 6 semi-structured interviews with Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment, the regulator, the nuclear power company, energy company, research institute, and municipality representatives of siting officials. And we did thematic analysis to identify these key overarching topics. And here they are. So they are organized according to what emerged from these interviews, and we are not saying that this need for strong energy political backing for SMRs, for example, came only from a certain stakeholder, like a ministry, for example. It was identified by this group of key stakeholders, these 4 needs. So without political willingness to proceed with SMRs, we cannot proceed, no matter how brilliant is the technical design. So then there is a need for common forum for all key stakeholders within the SMR ecosystem. In Finland, there are a few projects already that are building this ecosystem around SMRs to understand better these needs, but obviously there is this need for common forum, and common is the key word here. So what kind of common forums can be organized around these issues so that they make sense is still a kind of a thing that we need to think more also in Finland. But there is a need for that. And then there is a need for competence building and understanding of risks. So many of those officials, for example, in the municipalities or other expert groups, they don't know enough. And there is a need to understand better what are SMRs, what exactly will come to Finland, what does this mean? And not only technical competence, but more like understanding sustainability issues also, how it will affect workforce, how it will affect next generations, and all these other things that go beyond the technical. So the things that are also related to city planning and future, that are within the scope of decision making of these stakeholders. And understanding risks, we need to communicate risks better to all stakeholders. was importantly and very much highlighted. And then need for information and communication. It may sound very generic and kind of easy. Okay, yes, of course, but like, what exactly information is needed? To whom do you communicate it and how? And how do you communicate it? Yesterday, again, Sean gave a very good example of that. How do you communicate to the public? What kind of language do you use? And sometimes something that is obvious for us, and we are used to use certain vocabulary in our professional area with colleagues. Other people may have totally misunderstand you, or they just stop hearing you at some point. So it's important to be aware of this process of communication, so that willingness to communicate is not enough. We need to understand how to communicate with different stakeholders so that we can be heard and understood. Some takeaways, of course, from this little study that continues, but also just to close up, the current status of SMRs landscape, stakeholder landscape in Finland. We try to open this up by also learning from what happens in Canada and other countries, but also by actually talking to stakeholders to better understand their needs and expectations. And also, there is a big question here, like, who is responsible for that? Who is responsible for organizing these discussions between these three subsystems, for example? How to do it, when, where? There are so many questions that we need to answer. And there are, of course, a lot of challenges and opportunities that are related to regulation, licensing, stakeholder interaction, and interfaces between different stakeholders. There was interest, of course, in this topic. This is very important. People were very willing to talk to us, but this is just like the beginning. It will be very interesting to do more studies on stakeholder needs and engagement on this topic in Europe and globally, of course. And as a closing up, the institutional strength in that is a concept that is developing. I participated in technical meeting by IAEA a few months ago, where the new draft is, they are preparing a new draft of the document, so there will be a new publication soon coming, because ISAC 27 was published 2017, so we need an update, so stay tuned for that. And there are a lot of new things added there that are complementing the technical strength. And human organizational factors, of course, are one thing there, but like how to understand this better in SMR context is still an open question. So yeah, we need strong institutions in order to proceed further with licensing, deployment, and implementation of SMR projects in the future. And a good safety culture and leadership for safety is needed. And all the regulators will require all the key stakeholders and, of course, the owner to prove that they have a good safety culture before proceeding. So this is also an important aspect to understand that this is another normative thing that it's not important. It's part of the licensing actually overall, and part of the all critical life cycle phases, which we also discussed about yesterday. I think that's all from me now. I wanted to share with you. Any questions that come now to your hand?
Thank you, Nadia.
Yes. Let's show the other presentation. Yeah, for the group. Are you confused? Yes, this is the working group. We can talk more about.
So before entering the presentation of the activity after the coffee break, please, some questions?
Yes.
Maybe can we look at your question? Who's responsible for the talks?
For the talks.
For the talks with the public. So who's actually responsible for that? For conducting some talks, I don't know, educate the public and try to harmonize the idea of having maybe for some country for building new nuclear reactors, something like that. So who is
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, and I think the overall responsibility is for the talking and organizing this, perhaps is with the government, because they are, after all, the ones that are setting this institutional framework. But then, if you think that the primary responsibility for safety lies with the industry, then the industry are expected to have a really important and active role in that, and actually helping the government also to organize the talks, because government is not necessarily experts in nuclear safety or nuclear engineering or physics or whatever. You know, so the government needs to work closely with the industry to guide this.
There is
process.
let's say something similar in Italy. We are doing now, and the responsibility of organizing this issue of a stakeholder interaction is on the state company that is in charge of the commissioning, because in Italy we should identify the national repository for the radioactive waste. It is coming from the decommissioning, but also from the hospitals, from the industry applications, or from the research bodies, universities, whatever. So there is a law that obliges Italy to set up, to identify this repository. There is a law that is guiding the process, but the organization of the interaction with the stakeholders is in charge of the responsible of designing and building and managing the repository. That is a state company. So in principle, I guess that this type of stakeholder interaction is on the shoulder of everybody, because I think that NGOs, they may organize their own interaction, probably.
Everybody can be active in this.
All the people that are interested in are in principle allowed, it's not forbidden, to organize a public debate, a public discussion, some meetings, but for sure it is a topic that is in charge of the government, the national or even the regional or the local government.
Yeah.
I guess that.
And this process needs to be governed effectively. So you need to coordinate all these kind of activities. It's not possible that here and there pop up different discussion groups. So it needs to have a coordinated nature, this process, and steering and governance. So that's why there should be perhaps some kind of selected body in the government that takes care of that. Yeah, but they cannot work alone. So they need these interactions then that I talked about. That this is when they actually take place. Yeah.
Other questions?
Yes.
Please.
So that was really interesting. It's interesting because what we suffer from in the industry is the communication of the nuclear, and any problem of communication in one part of the world affect the whole world. For example, in Europe, when Germany decommissioned its reactors, then in Africa, when you want to build a nuclear power plant in South Africa and in Ghana, then people will tell you Germany is closing its reactor. Why
Why we
should
should
we
open?
just open that? So because of that, I think this is really a global issue. I just want to ask you because right now we have some groups like Stand Up for Nuclear. It's an international group. We stand up for nuclear and we are young people, but nobody is telling us what to say. Sometimes I'm really afraid that our way of telling the information is not the correct way. So we really need guidance on how to communicate it with the public. And also with governors.
That's a very good point, and that's why I also talked about the importance of how could we communicate, because I think we often take for granted that we just communicate the way we are used to, but it's you
There is a layer always between scientists and public.
exactly. So I think it's not. Of course, you can have like a trial and error approach, but I would say we just need this kind of high level guidance from international institutions on that, and we need a lot of global discussions because there are also national cultural issues involved in that, and might be this initiative that started by OECD NIA on country-specific culture. Probably you are aware of that. There were two publications about Finland and Sweden based on country-specific culture. They call it country-specific, not national culture, and safety culture. What are the links between these two? And there were national forums organized. But there was a lot of interesting learnings between Sweden and Finland and that. And I have heard that the next country that will be done is probably Canada. So good luck with that one. It's such a, you have so much diversity there. So, but this is also a value. So, yeah, I think we learn from all these initiatives how to communicate. And maybe it's also that it is not that one size fits all. Also, some flexibility is needed for.
So a general guidance would be very
Yeah.
useful, but at the end you have to
You
tailor,
have to tailor it exactly. Yes.
because your country is different from my country is different from. So we have to.
Yeah. There is one question there. Yeah.
Please.
So, question about media.
Yeah.
For example, to consider the case of Gazprom, like during the long period of time, they were investing a lot of money in the TV adverts, in the sponsors, in the football clubs, or everywhere. Like, are you considering something not like this, but similar, like to kind of work with the public opinion in this way?
For SMRs, you mean?
No, just
In general.
energy.
Yeah. I think it's a very thin line, One has to be very careful with that because there are also ethical issues that we need to consider, and then how much is too much when you put a lot of money here and there and say that, hey, we are supporting this and this and this initiative now you have to support us. So it just doesn't work like that. I mean, the public is very sensitive to these kind of ethical issues and what is a good way of doing business actually, and if the companies are really doing what they say and all these kind of things. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I think the media is also always hungry for sensations. You have to learn how to deal with media. It's not that in nuclear power companies there is a set PRP people that are trained to work with nuclear, and this is important. Yeah, sure.
I just had one comment that I wanted to add. Somebody asked me yesterday what we did after Fukushima. I mentioned more technical things, but human factors, how we make decisions, a lot of that work that you're doing right now is a big thing that came out of Fukushima. And I think you said it much more eloquently than I ever could, but a lot of this work is a direct result of looking at accidents like Fukushima. And it's probably more important than some of the technical issues that happen or how people make decisions. There's a lot to learn in what you just presented. Thank you.
Was it after 3 Mile Island that there was this expression in some of the reports that no amount of technical fixes can overturn the wrong attitudes or something like this. So these are so deeply ingrained things. Sometimes our assumptions and attitudes that they can ruin the brightest technical designs, or they can work together for a great future. Then alternatively, also, we just need to understand this better, and it's not easy. I'm just worried that we are eating our coffee break. So should we present this then when they come, or
after the how many slides?
oh, it's very good.
No, let's start. Okay.
2 minutes.
3 minutes, and then we move for a coffee break, and then we are back here with subdividing 5 groups, and we will give you. Okay, now Nadia is explaining what we will give you and what.
So we're going to do role play after the coffee break, and the idea here is that this kind of a role play allows you to safely step into the shoes of different stakeholders and try to simulate a public dialogue or public trust hearing. I think there could be different phrases in different countries. But anyway, we try to resemble a real-life situation with regards to exploring the needs of and interests of different stakeholders regarding deployment of SMRs. And a hypothetical example is that, for example, a utility is planning to deploy 2 SMRs, one in Finland and one in Italy. And I think the idea is that you can choose as a group where you want to deploy your SMR. One is pro-nuclear, one is against, or kind of hesitating. Right.
Now the situation is changing, but we suffered the referendum. You may imagine the situation in Italy.
Right. And this is just like to help you with the visualization and your imagination. It's not that you have to say like exactly where it should be the sighting, but you can of course play with this and say together as a group.
Comments about Lecco. Okay, you see the lake, the mountains. This is anyway quite an industrialized area. There are a lot of companies in mechanical industry. Very good level, very high level. I would say well educated because we have a campus of Politecnico di Milano here. You have the university. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hospitals. I would say that it's not very crowded. The population density is a good population density, but only in these areas. Then the other part are quite scattered. And then this is the most important information about Lecco.
And Espoo is the 2nd largest city in Finland. Population 300,000 residents, and it has large natural areas, and you can see tourism is very well developed. So there is a very long shoreline, 58 kilometers. Of course, you can check the info from Wikipedia, but from industrial perspective, there are several major companies that have their headquarters there. And ICT, biotech, food, and creative industries, and all sorts of like industrial companies are also located there. But Espoo was one of the cities in Finland which were interested in building SMR especially for the transport, to make it totally use SMRs for the transport. So you can play with that really. The location is not the most important thing, but it helps with the contextualizing. And we will give you this hypothetical example also printed to each group. And these are the 3 questions that you can focus on in your discussion. What are the questions you want to ask as a stakeholder in your role? So each of you will have a role. Let's see if I can. Yeah. So these are the roles. each of you can select which stakeholder you are representing, and one person will be observer, neutral role. So the observer will take some notes on how the discussion is going, who is like most vocal, and was it a constructive dialogue, and these kind of things. You can pick up whatever you want from the discussion as an observer, but just to then report some observations from the discussion. And the idea is to have, I was thinking to have 6 groups because we have people also online, but I don't know whether they can work online, so how many
may
they
ask
are.
the people online to discuss among them
Yeah.
on the chat line,
Yeah.
to set up a group also online.
Yeah. And the idea is that you can start counting 1 to 5 so that we can mix you up a little bit so that you form 5 groups. I don't know if all the students are here today, so that maybe we don't have 10 in each group. Then let's see. We'll see. Yeah.
Anyway, one group is 10 people because
Yeah.
there are 9 stakeholders plus 1 observer.
Yeah. And yeah, that's it. And then the idea is, of course, let's see how our time is. But the idea was to discuss 20 minutes and then 10 minutes for in-group reflection, and then 5 minutes for each group to share some insights with everybody.
So we will ask the observer to say, okay, in my group, I saw this item, this problem, this discussion, this hot topic, to share with everybody what were the main findings, the main results of the discussion. So we will ask the observers to share with everybody some outcome.
Observations, yes. So these are the main things if you think about these 2 countries, like how to address the project, what kind of approach you want to see from stakeholder perspective, what are the questions you want to ask, what kind of information you need and from whom, when, what do you need to know more about, and then how to understand and align the needs of different stakeholders. This is also an interesting question. What would be your proposition to go forward with that?
So keep those questions as a...
You will have them in print in each
group.
group. Yeah.
Okay, coffee break.